Welcome to Housing for Good, a podcast dedicated to housing topics and issues affecting our communities in McPherson County and beyond. With years of experience and expertise, hosts Chris Goodson and Karolyn Moore discuss housing challenges and opportunities with other experts from a variety of housing fields.
Good afternoon and welcome to Housing for Good. I'm Karolyn.
And I'm Chris.
All right, Chris, what do we got for today?
Well, we have some news and events. First thing that I have is Brush Up Mac, which will be April 19th, 2025.
Yes.
So if you know of anybody that would like to have a team and put that together, we have some things on our website page. And as well, if you have a senior that maybe you would like to, maybe they need some help and they're afraid to ask. You know, A lot of our seniors, they just don't want to ask for help. And we really want to keep them in their homes. So
yes,
please have them sign up. There, like I said, there's information on our website, and then Karolyn will be taking those applications to the chamber and the senior centers and different places. So just be looking for that.
I'll distribute those in person in January, but you can go to McPhersonHousingCoalition.org right now, print off a homeowner form, print off a volunteer form.
Yeah.
So we'll really start getting into that after the first of the year.
Yeah, or call us, 620-241 7828 extension 11 or 17.
Absolutely.
Okay. What else we got?
Okay. So did you hear about what's going on in Spain? You know, we focus on the housing issue here in Kansas, in the United States. Well, come to find out, housing is an issue everywhere. And in Barcelona, Spain, they've had tens of thousands of people march downtown Barcelona on Saturday to protest the skyrocketing cost of renting an apartment in a popular tourist destination. And in reading this article, it seems like they have the same kind of thing going on there that we're seeing across the United States, and that is bed and breakfast. Somebody redoes a house, and then it's only for when tourists come to visit. And so the people that live there every day in that community can't find a place to rent because now those houses are taken off the market.
And we don't think about that when we go visit. When we were in Madrid, we didn't see a lot of that going on. But of course, I wasn't connected to the locals. Sometimes I like to have conversations with people that are from an area to see what's really going on. We've been in the Caribbean a couple times, and our bus driver took detours to show us what the people were living in while we were there. And I was like, wow, that makes this trip a little harder when I realized that these people serving me can barely afford to live here. They're living in shacks and substandard conditions.
Yeah.
So we need to be, thinking about that when we go somewhere, is what kind of conditions are people living in, and are we part of the problem?
Absolutely. You know, we went to St. Louis with my daughter and her children, and we got a bed and breakfast. It's so much nicer than your motels as far as what the accommodations and everything. But yeah, it's contributing to part of what we're seeing across the nation. So,
and even in McPherson, Kansas, we've got some here. I'm seeing more and more of those because we are a college town. I mean, our colleges aren't huge, but they are pretty good, and they're growing. And see, you're seeing more and more people with the colleges, with the sports teams that we have, with all the different things we have going on here. We have a lot of industry that bring in people from those companies that want to stay here for a day here and a day there. So, yeah, it's a huge issue.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Do you have anything else for news and events?
Not right now, I don't think.
Okay. Well, today, because of the holiday season, Chris and I are just going to have a little conversation between ourselves. We just sat in on a special committee on available and affordable housing. We watched this through Zoom. It was a 2-day special committee. So we want to talk with you about what we learned there, some of the people that presented information. Basically, this committee was made up of senators and representatives, so you got both sides of the government.
And it was a special task force, right?
Special task force, yes. And they are directly looking at studying and making recommendations concerning home ownership, with an emphasis on housing priced under $200,000 and the availability of such housing in urban and rural areas. Rental housing issues, including availability of affordable rental housing, eviction issues for tenants and landlords, potential amendments to the Kansas Residential Landlord and Tenant Act, housing for populations that face specific housing-related challenges such as fixed income for senior citizens, individuals undergoing substance abuse or mental health treatment, veterans, developmental disabilities, foster care system, correctional system, people coming out of those systems. The relationship between affordable housing and economic development in concerns of workforce, home builders, and businesses creating jobs in Kansas, housing law and policies in Kansas. And, I was really excited when I heard about this committee's meeting, but then as they were talking things over, all of a sudden you realize this could get really complicated.
It's very complicated. Housing's tricky.
Yeah.
Especially affordable housing. They always say that economic factors should handle a situation. So, it's like if you start a business and you do well, then a whole bunch of other people start a business, then pretty soon everybody's going to make less money. So then people fall out. It's not really like that for affordable housing because there's not a lot of incentives to build affordable housing. So you have to think about somebody has to step up and come in and give some kind of an incentives. And that's where those low-income housing tax credits come from. A part of that is to make that more affordable. So there's incentives for those developers to even want to do affordable housing.
Yeah.
So, that's really hard. And I think they need to figure out, in my mind, a little more a fair way of doing that. I feel like sometimes these maybe bigger nonprofits or bigger developers that are for-profit, they're really able to do a lot more than somebody, say, the size of McPherson Housing Coalition. We're not near as big as everybody else. But the scary part about that is that sometimes they don't have boots on the ground, is like what I'd like to say. And so they're not here maintaining that property, offering any type of services to those people. I saw one where every 6 months they have somebody new coming in and managing it.
Yeah.
There's no consistency. Maybe the property management's not being done well and people are being taken advantage of, or they're not repairing things. And so I think we have to really look at that very closely and make sure that they're doing that correctly.
Yeah, I agree. They had a lot of different people that testified at this, but one of the things that really stuck out to me was they had Kansas Housing Resource Corporation come in and talk about the overview of programs administered by them. Now, we know KHRC because that's where we get our money for our Emergency Solutions Grant, our TBRA. Any money for housing comes from HUD into the state of Kansas, or any state comes from HUD into that state agency, and then they're the ones that accept the applications, they're the ones that disperse the grants, they're the ones that kind of oversee all of that from the up in the sky, looking out across our state to know where to put the money, and I think they do a pretty good job of spreading that around. But it was interesting to hear them talk. You can always find their page on what they actually do at Kansas Housing Resource Corp, KHRC. Google that and it'll come up. There's lots of programs that they manage.
Yeah, I thought Alex from Kansas Bankers Association did a really nice job talking about what they were doing, and there was quite a bit of money that they have in a loan program that's not being utilized. So there is money out there if we can all figure out how to get it.
Yeah, something like $60 million is just sitting there.
Yeah.
So then the lawmakers were like, okay, why is that money just sitting there? Why is it not being used? And I think, it makes you stop and think when they're looking at the rules and the regulations around being able to access that kind of money. Is it too difficult? Is it too burdensome on the agency or the person that's going to try to go after it? So that was very interesting.
Yeah, this was they had a lot of great speakers on this first day, especially looking at somebody came from the Manufactured Homes Association talking about manufactured homes. Is that really an answer to what's going on? And I don't know, I kind of have mixed feelings about that. Some of the lenders don't loan on manufactured homes, even if it's on a permanent foundation.
I did not realize until we were talking after this committee hearing, we were talking about that. And I'm like, okay, they're saying there's a difference between a mobile home, which they said had not been built after, 1976 or something like that. But now they're called manufactured homes. And you were saying, okay, here's the difference.
Right.
So tell me about the difference.
Well, there's modular, manufactured, and mobile homes. Mobile homes were built prior to 1976. I think it's actually a little bit later than that, actually, but 78, somewhere in there. So the ones built after that time period HUD has labels on them saying that they meet certain criteria, where the ones before that did not. So that's a big one. So there's tags on all of those mobile homes or manufactured homes that are built after a certain time period. But it's still difficult to be able to get a loan on one of those. And then there's modular homes, and you add that on top, which is actually a stick-built home that's brought in two pieces and put together just like a manufactured home. But they don't have a steel undercarriage, so that's the difference.
Yeah,
Mobile homes are brought in, our manufactured homes are brought in on wheels.
Yeah.
They take the wheels off and the axles off, but they still have that steel undercarriage, so that's still considered a manufactured home. A modular home does not have that steel undercarriage. However, when they place them, they still may have a big black, I forget what they're called, but it's a big beam that goes through, and then that holds it together to make sure that it doesn't fall into the basement or whatever.
Okay.
But a lot of times for the manufactured homes, it's hard to get a loan. So if somebody were to purchase one of those, are you really building wealth, or is it just a place to stay?
Yeah.
They don't always, they don't have as big of a lifespan. Sometimes it's hard to get parts for a manufactured home versus a stick-built house. There's just a lot of problems with those. So I wasn't sure from a personal perspective if I thought that was really a great answer.
Yeah. I know one of the things that we've run into when we've done Brush Up Mac, because we will have folks that are over in Mustang Mobile Home Park that want us to work on their house. Maybe the ductwork it's fallen, or it's not where it needs to be, or the roof is not good. It gets really tricky to work on those houses. Because, like you said, they're not built the same. Mm-mm. So it gets, like I said, really, really tricky. The other thing that I'm learning about is when it comes to those mobile homes, those mobile home parks, the people that have their houses there, they own the house.
Correct.
They do not own the property underneath it.
Right.
The land. So they have to pay a lot rent.
Yeah.
And so when we're talking about affordable housing, a podcast I just listened to earlier was saying how you have private equity companies coming in and they buy up these mobile home parks and they want to raise the rent. Well, the person that put their mobile home on that piece of property, they go into this, and they're low income for the most part. They go into this knowing this house is paid for, this is what my lot rent is, I'm going to be able to live here forever and retire, and it's all going to be great. Except now they come in and they raise the rent, and pretty soon the folks are struggling, even in a mobile home, to be able to afford the lot rent, their food, their medicine.
Right, because that's never paid for.
It's never paid for.
You will never be able to pay for that unless you take that manufactured home and take it out in the country and put it on a piece of ground or something.
Something that you own.
And so that's what I said. I have a mixed emotions about whether how affordable that is. I know we have a lot of them in our community, and for the most part, I think they are serving their purpose, but long term.
Yeah.
And the other part about it is typically it's kind of like a car loan. You can't get a loan on one of those for very long.
Yeah.
So your payment might actually be higher than if you bought a stick-built house that costs quite a bit more.
Yeah.
Because you can't do it over 30 years or whatever that looks like. So now you don't own the land, your payments are higher. Is it really a good investment? And would you advise somebody that you know to do that? It's a roof over your head as long as you can continue to pay that lot rent.
Absolutely. Yep. So another organization that was there to testify was Johnson County Hillcrest Transitional Housing. And, I was really, my ears perked up when these people started talking because they have a program very similar to what we're doing, Chris. This is a 90-day housing program. They do individuals and families, which we're trying to aim more for families. But the adults in their program, they have to find and maintain a job full-time. They have to be able to do some weekly sessions for life skills, case management, budgeting. They must be drug and alcohol free, and they have to be willing to follow all the program guidelines. That it always gets interesting when you're talking with somebody about your programs because they want to think that everybody follows the rules all the time. And that's just not real life. He had to say that if the folks that are in the program aren't following the rules, then we ask them to leave, keep the door open that they can come back when they're ready. But not everybody's ready when we think they should be. So
yeah, and we see that too.
We see that
quite often as well. I mean, we have to protect everybody that lives in that complex or that village, as we call it. So we have to make sure that there are rules in place for a reason. We're not just doing that to be mean or to be controlling. We want to make sure that that's a safe place. Back in the 60s, I think they put up a lot of affordable homes. But again, there was nobody paying attention. There was nobody giving them case management. There was nobody making sure that they were well kept because of that. And now a lot of them aren't even livable.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that if we're going to be doing this affordable housing, that we do it responsibly with rules, with people that are on the ground, with people who are maintaining the property, making sure that people that own that particular piece of property have something invested where they care about that community. I think that's so important that we do that. Something else that I saw here was really interesting and it's really important is the Cerebral Palsy Research Foundation was there talking about how much rent has increased for our disabled folks and how hard that is for them to be able to maintain housing because the rents are skyrocketing. And if you're on disability, that is not very much money.
Yeah.
That is not very much money. And so it makes it really hard for somebody on disability. I mean, if you think about it, disability for somebody who's never worked, say somebody who's special needs, it's less than $1,000 a month. So that could be all your rent. And even though you might get subsidies like Section 8 or housing choice vouchers or food assistance, that's pretty hard to try to make it on that.
You have to be so good with managing your money. Something else that they talked about was community land trusts. And before Nick Gregory left our community, he had a woman come in here and talked with us. I'm not exactly sure where she was from, maybe Topeka?
Somewhere back. I thought it was Eastern, but I'm not sure.
And that's a very interesting concept, too, where the community owns the houses.
They own the land.
Okay, they own the land.
Yes.
The people can buy the house.
Yes.
But if they ever want to move, they can only sell that house to somebody knowing that this is what I paid for the house. So let's say I'm just going to throw a number out there. I bought this house for $150,000. Well, then the price of my house goes up, which we're seeing.
Right.
But I can't now turn around and sell it for $300,000.
Right.
I have to sell it for basically what I paid for it, which keeps that house in that pocket of renters or homeowners that can afford a $150,000 home.
I think there's some profitability in there, but not a lot. They limit that. Because if you think about it, when you buy a home, that's part of it, of gaining wealth, is being able to take that, how much money you've made off that house and go buy something better. And then you just continue to go down the line buying things better and better until you're ready to downsize. And so I think it's a great program, especially for somebody who's just starting out or, somebody out of high school who's got their first job or someone coming home from college or, a couple that's got student loan debt and they can't afford very much. I think there's a lot of people that would really benefit from a program like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how hard that is to get started, but you have to have land. I think they're doing some things in Hayes. I'm not exactly sure, but there was some land donations there. So you have to figure out, land is such a hard commodity to get a hold of. Because, we just can't go make more land.
Well,
this is all we have.
Yeah, and then you have to have the infrastructure around it in order to develop it. But it was interesting to hear all these different people come together to talk about an issue that we're all struggling with how to address it.
Yeah, and then you look at this Finney County economic development. People don't really understand that housing is economic development, that housing and new jobs, it's hand in hand. If I bring in this huge company and I need all these workers, well, where are they supposed to live? And if we can figure out how to balance that, not only do we get to grow our community, but we get more amenities, more restaurants, more things for our kids to do. I mean, just a lot of things. And so that's why people need to pay attention. If you're not struggling with housing issues at all and you're just kind of living your life, think of it that way, that it really benefits your community if you can build housing that's affordable for people at Walmart or somebody at the schools or even at your hospital. I mean, if we can bring in housing for all of those people, then that helps all of us.
Yeah.
I mean, we had people from Wichita there. That was really interesting. They've got some big, major stuff going on in Wichita with their homelessness.
They do. And, we see these stories on the news about terrible landlords, terrible property conditions. And they came loaded with pictures to show these people. They really want something done with the Landlord-Tenant Act. They want stricter penalties and ways of making people
keep their property,
keep the properties up,
maintain their property. Yeah. And so that's an interesting thing as well, because, a lot of times in these communities, even if they have some things put in place that homes have to have certain habitability standards, if a tenant tells on a landlord, a lot of times they just say, get out of my house.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then they just move the next guy in. And so how do you balance that so you're protecting people but holding people accountable at the same time? And if they do it where they inspect all the homes that are rental properties, then somebody like me that has just a couple, am I going to have to pay and be responsible like the guy who owns 100 or maybe more or less or whatever, who's not maintaining his properties? I mean, there has to be some common sense in all of this.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that we're doing this fairly?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting because I feel like Wichita, they were really vocal. They spoke for quite a while about what they're facing in their city. And I feel like, that some of what they were saying, we can track that right back to McPherson and some of the landlords that we have here. We have some really good landlords, and then we have a few that are really bad. And so how do you make it safe for families without causing issues when there's complaints? And it'll be interesting to see what the legislative branch does with what they were presented with.
Yeah, and you have to understand, too, they don't understand all of this.
They don't.
There's no way that they can understand all of this. I'm sure there's a few that have some housing experience, but there's no way. I mean, all the things that we have coming at our senators and legislators up there, I don't know how they're supposed to know everything about everything. They can't possibly know. So it's why it's really important for us and other organizations and individuals to talk to them about what your experiences are so that they can get an idea of what that looks like from somebody else's perspective.
Well, and we just had Senator Michael Fagg on the podcast a few weeks back. And the one thing that he said was, if there's something that concerns you, call me. If I don't know the answer myself, I will visit with people to find out who I need to talk to about what your concern is. I appreciated that from him.
Yeah, he was a really good, interesting interview. He seems to be very caring and concerned about the people that live in his district. So
yeah.
Well, what else do we have?
Well, I think that we want to talk about Christina Ashley Goodry's information that she shared. She is with the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network. She's also the Director of Policy and Planning for the United Community Services of Johnson County. For everyone listening, we want to thank you for joining us for part 1 of this podcast. What Christina shared is really lengthy. There's a lot of information that we, as a housing coalition, as well as KHAN, are going to the legislators to talk about. And I kind of feel like that we need to make that a separate podcast on its own.
Okay, and the information is really, really good, talking a lot about our communities and networks and the housing continuum. There's a lot of really good information here, housing and economic growth and just all of that kind of stuff, how it affects you and your parents and your kids and your grandkids and all of that. So yeah, I think we should have a part 2 of this and talk more about what's going on in housing across Kansas and maybe even a little bit across the world.
Yeah. So to finish up this one, I just have one more thought. The thing that everybody that presented came back to is we didn't get here overnight.
Yeah.
It has been decades of not building, decades of cutting HUD funding, years of not caring. I'm okay, so I'm not going to worry about what's going on with you. And I think now we're kind of at a tipping point, and it's got everybody's attention. So that's why this committee met, and this is why everybody is having these conversations. We would just appreciate it if you want to leave a review or a comment. Go to housingforgood@mcphersonhc.org.
And if you'd like to donate to McPherson Housing Coalition Housing for Good, you can send those donations to 1826 14th Avenue, McPherson, Kansas, 67460. We would appreciate that. We are a nonprofit, and our goal really is to bring attention to the housing situation that's going on in McPherson, Kansas, across the country and around the world, and just continue to bring attention to what is going on there.
So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time on our next podcast.